Yeah, so this is the state it's been for the past 4 years. Quite a bit of play. Not very nice. So this is the shifter assembly I got from a used car, and I'm gonna be working on it, making it better to put in mine. The main offender in this case was this part, this joint where it would have excessive play. And the issue with these, at least on 4-cylinder diesel cars, is that these pieces are not serviceable. This joint on the main link is riveted as it comes from factory, and there's no way to take it apart. If this joint develops free play, the only way that you can fix it correctly is by buying this whole piece. And this whole piece for my car where I live is 110 euros just for this part. So it's a bit not cheap. So what I've done to go around it is I've drilled off the riveting and then drilled a hole in the end of the shaft and tapped it to accept a fastener. That way I can disassemble it, take it apart, do whatever I want and put it back together. Easy as that. So what you can see, what I've done is I got just some general purpose bushings, oil sintered bronze bushings. These were flanged, and I replaced the original ones, which were these, with the bushings that are in here now. The only thing being is that the bore inside this piece is not very friendly. It's around 14.7 millimeters, and there is really hardly any way you can find bushings with OD of 14.7 millimeters. So what I did, I got a pair of bushings, flanged ones that were 16 millimeter, and what I've done, I've put them on a drill and I filed them to size. Well, yeah, ideally you would want to machine them, have a lathe, make new bushings, put them in, but for home gamers it's good enough. I used, for anyone wondering, a bolt like this. It's a chamfered bolt and a chamfered tapered nut. The nut is of an anchor bolt like this. It would go in here normally. So I've used these two conical surfaces tapered. That way I can put a bushing in here, tighten those down, and it will be sort of center enough for this purpose. That way I machined down these bronze bushings to fit into the bore, and they fit. They fit perfect, and there is pretty much no play at all. You can see a little bit because this shaft is a bit undersized. The shaft is, well, we can measure, but when I measured before it was something around 9.95, so like 0.05 of a millimeter undersized. Maybe it's worn, maybe it was made that way to prevent it from binding. Yeah, so it's a bit, there is a tiny bit of play, but it's nowhere near as much as it had before. So now this joint can be serviced, can be put back together. It has absolutely no play whatsoever. Well, whether that's good or bad is another question. So why are diesel, 4-cylinder diesel shifter linkages different from all other models? Well, the only reason I can think of is that 4-cylinder diesels have a lot more vibration than either 6-cylinder diesels or even more so 6-cylinder petrols. Basically so that your drivetrain can vibrate as much as it does, and this isolates those vibrations from the gear shifter so it doesn't shake at idle. So these bushings, well, they're also worn, but they're also a little smaller and oval as well, because they're worn. Yeah, they're a bit smaller than the internal bore of this, which is 14.7, and this we measured 14.4 maybe at best when it was new. And it clamps down with this teeth on the shaft. On the shaft, and at the end it has play. Well, yeah, it's also worn. There's a lot of wiggle room. But I think that's some of that free play is engineered in, so that these rubber seals, rubber bushings, hold onto this little lip, the small one on the outside, and they keep it centered. Meanwhile, this whole bore this OD is floating inside there. So when there's no load applied, these can sort of have some play, and only when you pull the gear lever to the side it will take up the free play and move together with the linkage. While on idle, in neutral position, it will sort of float with only the rubber acting as a damper / spring to support and dampen the vibrations. So for that reason, I am not exactly extremely sure how well this will work now that I put in solid bushings, because it will not have that dampened free play. Now it's pretty much completely solid. It has a tiny bit of play because, well, this shaft is also maybe a bit worn, maybe it was machined to be a bit undersized so it doesn't bind in any circumstances with thermal expansion, different materials, and so on. The next point of interest is this joint bushing right here. It also is not, it's not new. It's definitely seen better days. Not sure you can see it very well, but it has a little bit of play. So to solve this, similarly as I did this joint, I got a pair of bronze bushings that I am planning to put in here, like this. The bronze bushings have the same internal diameter as the shifter rod and as this bore once had. It's 10 millimeters. However, yeah, as you can guess, it's a bit bigger and it won't fit here. Now, there are probably multiple ways how to enlarge this hole to make those bushings fit. However, I am a bit impatient and I think I'm just gonna try and drill it out to 14 millimeters with a 14 millimeter drill bit. That is not the best option, definitely. Ideally, you'd want at the very least to use a drill press so it goes straight down and you don't go like this into the hole, making it bigger, which will make the bushings, 1, not align, 2, not even stay in place, and it's not very good. Yeah, ideally you'd probably drill that hole to 13.5 millimeters, something like that, and then use a reamer tool to ream it to more precise size. But yeah, I'm gonna try drilling it. If it doesn't work, well then I have some epoxy. And all in all, this part here is not that big of an offender. So in my case, I might even get away without doing any work to this spot. because it does have a little bit of play, but it's not too bad. Once it's clamped down with the clip and the plastic washers, it's fairly okay. But granted, that only puts preload on the free play, and once you put more force into the shifter, it will overcome that preload, and that free play is still there, but it's masked out by the preload that all the hardware puts on it. So, as it turns out, it's not a solid bushing in here. As you can see, the diameter decreases with a little bit, so it was not as smooth as I expected, but yeah. Also, this diameter inside is also not very good for us, because it's something like 13 millimeters, and our bushing is 14. So I've started drilling it out, and it's definitely not a job for a hand drill. I mean, it didn't go oversized. The bushing doesn't go in here yet, so that's a good sign, because if I make it too big, then it's a bigger issue. You can always make a hole bigger, but it's harder to make it smaller. So yeah, definitely not a job for a hand drill. As ugly as they get. Not sure I should have even touched this part, but figured if I already started, might as well go through with it. So yeah, it's not pretty, but it is more or less 14 millimeters now, and I should be able to put the new bushings in here. But yeah, definitely not as easy as I thought it would be. So this is what I ended up with. Managed to put the bronze bushings into the bore. Of course, using a hand drill, one side of the bore turned out a bit oversized, but I used epoxy, put it in place. Well, it's in there. Not the prettiest job, and frankly, I'm not too sure whether it was worth it. I mean, whether it was worth it even touching this piece. It wasn't too bad, and yeah, it's well, I've done it, and it's gonna work. It's gonna be okay. But yeah, not sure it was worth the effort. Yeah, another thing I did not mention. This piece had a lot of play in between this shaft and the outer skin that connects to the gearshift knob. Yeah, they are molded together with rubber, and it had developed quite a bit of play in here. I simply jammed a bunch of little screws in there. It's definitely not the prettiest way to do this. Maybe a nicer way would have been to make some shims that would take up half of the perimeter of this from some thin sheet metal and jam them in there one by one as much as needed. Yeah, but this works as well. It's gonna be a test. Now let's take a look at the one I've just removed from my own car. So this is probably the most interesting piece. It has, well, for starters, quite a bit of play. In all directions. This piece is completely loose. Yeah, the insert that you cannot see inside there is completely gone. There's not even a trace of it. Granted, my shift rod in the gearbox is leaking, The seal has been replaced a few years ago, but they don't last that long, I suppose. The gearbox is not new as well. Yeah, so this is bad. This guy, well, has seen better days. I mean, they're not the most offending piece. What is, however, this. That is quite a bit of play, as you can see, both ways. This fitment, again, it has a little bit of play, maybe more than the one I got from the junkyard, but it's probably not the main issue. But yeah, it could always be better. So yeah, that's the old stuff. Oh, also these bushings. They have quite a bit of play. So I don't think it's gonna be bad that I replace these as well. Yeah, that's the old. And time to assemble the new assembly. Yeah, so these are the bits that go inside here that you cannot see, but yeah, inside there, between the end of this bore and the shaft that goes into the gearbox, there should be a piece like this. It's fairly soft rubber, some sort of a rubber sponge type of thing. Yeah, and the old one looks like this. This is the one from the junkyard shifter assembly. The one in mine was nowhere to be found, no remains of it. So yeah, this is the old, and that's how it's supposed to look when it's new. Yeah, so I think all in all it's gonna improve the shift feel quite a bit. At the same time I replaced these bushings. They are not too bad. They were not too bad, but I figured since I'm already in here, I'll replace those. They were not a cheap part. They were like, I think 10 euros each. So 20 euros in these bushings. But hey, if it helps the issue, then I'm fine with it, and I don't have to go in back later to chase the same problem again. Okay, so time for the test. So now it's only this much free play. It's not even, well, it's much better. Now it's much more defined, a definite improvement. The only thing left to test is, well, whether it will do this on idle. So okay, engine is on, and I can feel a little bit of vibration from the engine on the shifter, but it's definitely not doing this. Very nice. I will call this a success.